Supply chain management can make or break a company. If your life sciences or pharmaceutical company can't quickly adapt to supply chain disruptions, patients and providers who need your products may not have access to them. On the other hand, pharmaceutical companies that anticipate supply chain challenges and adjust accordingly have a distinct advantage in the marketplace. I'm Jennifer L.W. Fink, host of Secure Innovation, How Life Sciences and Pharmaceutical Companies Can Safely Seize Opportunity, a 3-episode podcast series intended to help you grow your business. In episode 1, we detailed 6 steps to strong cybersecurity in life sciences manufacturing. In episode 2, we explored how companies can maximize the opportunities embedded in the latest QA guidance. And in this, our final episode, we're going to discuss how artificial intelligence can help life science manufacturing companies secure and optimize their supply chains. Let's get right to it. Joining me today are Pari Singh Vavi, NTT DATA's Managing Director for Life Sciences Consulting, and Bharat Binyas, Senior Manager, Supply Chain Consulting for NTT DATA. Welcome, Pari and Bharat.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Pari, what are the primary supply chain challenges in life sciences manufacturing right now?
Yeah, anyone who's been living through the recent pandemic and experiencing many of the drug shortages that they have been forced to deal with would come to the conclusion that something is broken in the supply chain. And, some of the things that are continuing to impact and potentially disrupt the supply chain are things like geopolitical conditions. In addition to the pandemic, we've experienced regional conflicts that sometimes disrupt the ability to move product. We have seen labor shortages, a variety of different conditions that are impacting the security of the supply chain. And the life sciences supply chain was not as secure as some other supply chains you'll be surprised to hear about, such as the electronic supply chain is much more secure because they've had serial numbers to monitor their products. But the pharmaceutical industry has only recently mandated the use of unique serial numbers for every product that is sold and delivered through the supply chain. So security is improving, but we need to add the digital layer to improve the security, and we'll talk more about that later today.
Bharat, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think in addition to these more global overarching challenges, you might recognize as well that life science companies deal more and more with increased customer demand for value beyond the product, so more focus on the value chain, and an increased scrutiny on the healthcare cost. So there's increased competition, leading to more price pressures. There's more power of, for example, buying groups. So there's more and more a challenge to find a good balance between costs, risks, security, but also sustainability.
So it's easy to get a little lost and overwhelmed by these challenges. We're talking about, huge challenges that are often beyond the control of, any individual or group of individuals. But these challenges also create some opportunities. So, Bharat, how can life science manufacturers secure their supply chain while addressing these challenges?
I think in today's world, historically, we were looking at maybe just increasing your safety stock in different locations, have inventory in every country possible to assure that there is enough to send out in case there's some sort of disruption, either pandemic or war, but also from a cybersecurity point of view, for example. However, as mentioned, in today's world, from a cost but also security perspective, you wouldn't maybe want that anymore. So it is really an opportunity to also create an operating model that is flexible in a different way and can also anticipate different scenarios on demand changes, on these global political events, and again, keep the balance between all the factors that are important, taking into account also really the local regulations of whatever region or country we are talking about.
So at this point in time, stockpiling in every country it's not even feasible. It's not a great option. Pari, we hear so much right now about artificial intelligence and the opportunities there. Is that something that companies can seize and use to help secure the supply chain while addressing these challenges?
Absolutely. We are all living in a world today where our cars drive themselves autonomously and are able to make decisions in micro and milliseconds that are putting human lives potentially at risk or saving them more often than not. Why can't we apply that level of AI to our supply chains and make them more resilient, make them more autonomous? It's not as if the autonomous driving car came overnight. It took decades of research, right? And the same way, luckily for us, we've learned from all those lessons, and we're now ready to apply the technology to supply chains to secure them further.
So what might that look like in terms of a supply chain? How would you use AI? And let's clarify, because AI can mean so many different things. We know it stands for artificial intelligence, but a lot falls under that.
Absolutely. Yep. So let's, talk about digital twins as a concept, and then let's talk about the use of AI as a concept on that digital twin. So a digital twin is essentially a virtual representation of a physical piece of equipment or process. These are examples of things that a digital twin can simulate. It can even simulate a city, for example, right, and traffic conditions. So all of these are digital twins. The supply chain digital twin will essentially represent the nodes of the supply chain, whether it's your suppliers or warehouses or customers in your digital twin. And the ability to apply intelligence on top of that is what differentiates your digital twin from just a representation to one that also is able to detect issues and resolve them with the help of the humans initially, but hopefully on their own down the road.
So paint a picture a little bit more, Pari. Give an example of, a digital twin in another scenario. For instance, you and I have talked previously, and you mentioned like a digital twin of a turbine in hydropower. I think that physical representation is a little bit easier for people to conceptualize if they're not familiar with this idea.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great example of something you may have even seen in movies where you have a turbine and the control room for that turbine has a digital view of that turbine, and you can see all the moving parts and you can see all the parameters of the temperature and pressure and so on. That is essentially a digital twin that you may have seen. Just imagine now, instead of the parts of the turbine, you're seeing the parts of your supply chain network, and you're seeing how the product is moving, how it's getting transformed in your manufacturing facilities, how it's getting to the end state of your customer's warehouse and so on. So that is an example of a digital twin when applied to supply chains. And the AI that can be brought into play is things like descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics to begin with, which are essentially the visualization and ability to diagnose issues manually. But then once you've started to train the AI layer on how to diagnose issues on its own, what types of issues to look for, it can start to do that on its own, and it can start to also predict issues before they happen, and it can also start to prescribe solutions to those predicted issues that you can and should consider implementing manually initially and then autonomously down the road.
This sounds like something that end product can be fantastic, but it takes time to get to that, right? You mentioned, the descriptive analytics, the diagnostic analytics, and then you mentioned training the AI. Discuss that aspect, how the technology learns and essentially becomes more intelligent over time.
Yep, absolutely. So essentially, if you break down the process of how we as humans interact with the world, it is essentially one where we are sensing data through, say, our eyes or ears, and we then interpret that data or translate that data. We then analyze that data and solve problems, and we then execute the solutions that we have come up with to solve that problem. So for instance, if I'm thirsty, I'll pick up the glass of water and drink it. All of those require the same sort of methods that I just went through, and the supply chain also would use the machine learning capability and neural networks to start to understand the different vulnerabilities of the supply chain, and it would start to come up with mechanisms to self-heal those vulnerabilities or even bolster the defenses against those vulnerabilities by introducing concepts such as redundancy or proximity or other means.
So what I hear you saying, I can imagine all kinds of benefits down the road. You create an AI-powered digital twin, and you mentioned the ability to detect vulnerabilities and then either self-heal or bolster security. It sounds like there would be the opportunity to act proactively instead of reactively.
Yep, exactly. That's what you're aiming for, right? And most cars today have that, where if the math is very simple, if the car is going at a certain speed and the car in front of you is going at a different speed, impact is imminent unless an action is taken. And most cars will start beeping today saying, beep, beep, you're going to have a crash. Why can't you do that for the supply chain? And with this level of AI added on top of your digital twin, you get exactly that. You get advanced threat detection and avoidance to some extent. The car will automatically brake for you in order to avoid an accident. That's the safest route to be taken.
And when we're applying this in life sciences manufacturing, it sounds like there's opportunities for increased efficiency as well.
Exactly. So, what we've been talking about is supply chain security, but underlying all of this is, first of all, designing your supply chain network such that it is well balanced across some of the things that Berit talked about earlier. And you're also designing your supply chain for optimal efficiency. And efficiency can mean a lot of things, but the meaning of efficiency in the supply chain world was paradigm shifted by the pandemic and is again being paradigm shifted by the introduction of digital technologies and sustainability. So, for example, before the pandemic, it was all just-in-time inventory management, and that resulted in the shortfalls that we had. Now we have moved off of just-in-time. We are getting safer inventory levels, and we are moving manufacturing closer to our customer base. But we also need to start thinking about sustainability. We need to start thinking about digital intelligence. You need to design for greenhouse gas reduction. So these are all things that the AI and digital twin will design and operate for as their default operating parameters rather than you having to put a lot of thought and effort into it.
Berit, earlier you had talked about the need for companies to, balance costs, risks, and sustainability. And Perry, you were just referring to how the definition and understanding of efficiency has shifted. So given all of this, what pieces do companies need to have in place before they can really take the step towards building a smart digital twin?
I think there are quite some foundational systems that should be in place. And very often also I want to mention that probably the start has been made already to enter this journey to a digital twin. So when we talk to clients of formerly Chainalytics, now NTT DATA Supply Chain Consulting, we often have projects where, for example, the client wants to have a greenfield study, let's say, of analyzing their supply chain network, right? Maybe it's also born by a need to move. However, there are many tools in place where you can do a greenfield analysis basically and see, hey, where can I put my new warehouse, for example, and including different parameters like, well, not only safety and regulations, but also think of labor costs or think of environmental stability or the economic situation, right? With these tools, you can use it a little bit as a sandbox and define your most optimum position, for example, based on whatever parameters are important for you. But you can also imagine and value the amount of data that would need to go into it. And then if we're going further than the network design thinking, if you're looking at foundational systems like your transportation management system or the data that is the basis for your S&OP processes or the data that is the basis for your warehouse management system, right? All this has as a requirement that you have data that you put into it. Once you have these kind of systems in place, you can start creating this full picture, right? And maybe it's just a picture that at the moment you have hey, let's look back 1 month. But as Paris said, right, the anticipation is that we want to learn and be able to proactively do something and not react to a problem that has happened a month ago. So this is the kind of the first basis. And then it goes further into what Barry has talked about, also being able to work with this data, to use it for analytics, really, to have an interconnectedness and also integration in between the different tools and systems that you're implementing.
So what I hear you saying is that a lot of times companies actually have more data, more of these pieces than they may realize at the beginning. So part of the challenge is identifying, figuring out what you have, then checking if all these pieces of data are interconnected or integrated. And I imagine in the process of doing this, then you also are revealing if there are, gaps, data that would be more helpful and provide a more complete picture.
Yes, of course, yes. And then, of course, you do a gap analysis and see where do we miss something. And maybe it's not always the case that you also know where to go, right? So then I would suggest, right, using or selecting a partner who can support you in that and to reach this end goal, right, of creating a digital twin and defining the steps that are needed to go there.
Selecting the right partner is so important for everything in business. When it comes to working on creating a digital twin to help with supply chain, Barrett or Perry, or both of you chime in here, what are some of the things that you're going to be looking for in terms of a partner?
Yeah, so you want a partner that has several different types of expertise intermingled into a collective, larger entity. As an example, we at NTT DATA have the capabilities stitched together of life sciences consulting, life sciences domain expertise, which is what I bring to the picture. We've got our supply chain consulting, which is what Barrett brings to the picture, and her larger organization. We've got data and analytics practices, and we've got AI, ML, and Gen AI practices. So all of these intermingled pieces together are what allow this magic sauce to come into being. It requires all of these ingredients to be there. And you want to make sure you pick a partner that has all of these necessary ingredients mixed in the right level of expertise and harmony together. And, you want to look at partners that have done this before with other clients. You want to make sure that you're not their scapegoat. And we at NTT Data are working and have worked on such engagements for many a customer.
Barrett, do you have anything to add? In your experience, are some indicators of a good fit between a company and a partner for helping them create a digital twin?
In my opinion, as Parius mentioned, we bring a lot to the table, I would say, right? So we're definitely, like, NTT is also a technology partner, but they're also very versed in different supply chain projects. There's life sciences context, there's a big bag of IT and analytics capabilities. So I think you would want to select a partner that really ticks on all sorts of boxes and not has a one-sided view and experience on things. And this might also help because what I do see next to, having the right systems in place and selecting the right partner, you also need to take your own organization into the change, right? So we don't want to talk about change management, but it's important. And certainly with digitalization and artificial intelligence, there might be staff or even key stakeholders, right? Not trusting in data and not trusting in what they might see at a screen, but maybe have a more traditional approach of looking at processes and the typical KPIs. So again, selecting a partner that can also show and gain the trust of the organization and the people that also need to be part of the change. I think having a partner then that has a lot of diversity and a lot of backgrounds might also underline creating this trust.
That's a really important point. To move forward, to really make this happen, your company needs to be ready. The people in your company need to be ready. You need to have a partner that has the expertise and can connect with the people at your company who may need a little, reassurance that, yes, we can do this. This is something that we can move forward. Here's how we're doing it safely. Here's how we're doing it smartly. Here's how we're going to do this securely. You mentioned before, Barrett, how you can kind of use this as like a sandbox, right? So you can test out and see how various things play out in this, I'll call it a digital sandbox, before you're experiencing real world consequences. And that sounds fantastic. We've talked about the big picture benefits of eventually building and training up an AI-powered digital twin that can anticipate and proactively respond to potential problems. But Perry, this is not something that happens overnight, is it?
Yep. No, it does not. And what we find, right, is clients across the entire maturity spectrum where some clients may still be implementing foundational systems at the one end of the spectrum. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have some clients, and this is all in life sciences that I'm talking about, you have some clients that have multiple digital twins already implemented, some of them that already also have some elements of AI built into them. And the problem they're grappling with is, how do I integrate all of these disparate digital twins into one cohesive intelligence? And that is a concept that is actually a very important concept as well, where if you think of the human intelligence as an example, it is all singular. So our intelligence is centralized in our brain, and that is our one and only source of intelligence. Whereas you have other animals like octopus, which have a very different intelligence architecture, where each of the 8 arms of an octopus has its own level of intelligence embedded within that arm. And as a way to better understand that, 2/3 of all of the neurons contained in an octopus are outside of the brain. 2/3 of the neurons are in their arms, and only 1/3 of their brain cells are essentially in their brain. So that level of distributed intelligence is what is taking hold in organizations today, where you will have isolated levels of visibility and intelligence in the form of digital supply chain twins, the functional digital supply chain twins, or functional control towers. All of those functional control towers pitched together is what forms the one interconnected intelligent digital supply chain twins that can be a standalone entity or can be embedded into one of your foundational systems as well. So these are the types of challenges that companies need to think through, and we are there to guide them and solve them. But more importantly, you need to start with 1 or 2 KPIs that you want to improve, or pick a specific pain point that you want to solve. You then prove that, start to derive value from it, and use that initial business value gain from that first problem that you've solved to then start to fund successive challenges and problems and pain points that are resolved through additional capabilities that you build and layer onto that initial first use case that you may have implemented. And before you know it, you're building momentum that cannot be stopped. And this is going to actually become a competitive factor. So organizations in life sciences as well will reach a day when margin and supply chain operating costs become such important factors that if you're not competitive and ahead of your peers through AI, you are going to fall behind and fail. So it's going to become a competitive differentiator and a survival strategy.
This is not something that you really want to wait too much on, because other people are already looking into and seizing and experimenting with, how can I use AI, which has potentials to think, and I'm putting some air quotes around that, in ways that we can't. I mean, Perry, you mentioned the octopus, which is a completely different way than our human intelligence works. Clearly, it is very effective.
Yes, you'll be surprised, but octopuses can actually unscrew bottle caps. They can do mazes. They're one of the most intelligent beings around, and very different level of intelligence, yes. And there's some great documentaries too that you can watch on that.
I'm a huge fan of octopus. I scuba dive. I think they're the most fascinating animals in the ocean. But before a company gets to, say, octopus level, right? You mentioned, each of the 8 arms of an octopus, it's got neurons on its own, and there's these different parts that are taking in and processing information. You pointed out that most companies, all companies, you need to start with one pain point, maybe 1 or 2 KPIs. Can you give an example of maybe where a company might want to start with this so people can begin to envision what it may look like?
Yep, and cost is also a factor, right? So you want to pick something that is not going to be expensive right off the gates. You want to start with something that can be quickly implemented and cheaply implemented. And there are many off-the-shelf solutions already that exist that provide this level of basic intelligence. You have visibility control towers for your transportation needs. You have procurement supplier control towers that can predict which of your purchase orders are going to arrive late at your manufacturing facility. So these types of point solutions can already be solved. And there are also the data lakes that can be quickly patched together to assimilate data from all of your disparate supply chain and related systems. And you can easily apply a BI layer on top of it to quickly build out a command center. You may have all seen command centers, say for a train transportation network or for, the space station. These are all, different command centers, and they essentially collect information, visibility and intelligence information and insights from different systems, different layers, and they bring it all into one place. And through that command center, you can actually monitor your entire supply chain. So you can achieve those kind of capabilities practically overnight. Within a few months, you can be up and running with many of these point solutions, and even a command center and a data lake doesn't take that long to set up and build. And we can help you with all of that, integrate your foundational systems, deploy your foundational systems if you don't have them, or upgrade your foundational systems if they're very old. These are all places where we recommend you start, and we also work with you to connect you to your suppliers and you to your third-party manufacturers. We integrate their systems with your systems to make one seamless supply chain, because remember, supply chain doesn't stop at the four walls of the enterprise. The supply chain is really all of your supply chain partners. That's why it's called a chain. Otherwise, it would be called a supply link if it was just your enterprise.
You alluded to cost, which is certainly an important factor. We mentioned part of the reason why this is so important is because balancing cost and efficiency and risk and sustainability is crucial right now. So by picking one relatively easy area to start with, companies can experience some cost savings, which you said they may be able to then use that cost savings to invest and work on the next section of a digital twin, a next part of the supply chain.
Absolutely. So a couple of areas where we can immediately see cost savings. One of the biggest cost drivers for supply chains, two biggest cost drivers, one is transportation costs, and the other is inventory holding costs. Of course, you have manufacturing as well, but that's a hairier, bigger beast to tackle. The two low-hanging fruits are, of course, transportation and your inventory carrying levels. And you can actually reduce and optimize both of those. And it sometimes it's optimized without reducing also, just by redistributing where you store your inventory and doing multi-echelon inventory optimization. Those are ways to optimize your inventory and take some costs out right away. And the other is by optimizing your transportation network. Not only do you take your costs out, you may increase SLA levels, and you may also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So these are all things that our supply chain network design practice helps with customers' supply chains on.
Barrett, in your experience, what are some things that companies may commonly overlook or fail to consider when creating a digital twin?
Yes, thank you. I think common mistakes that are made or not taken into consideration are, well, number one, I've mentioned that already, looking at the foundational systems. A digital twin, AI might seem a big vision, but think about, again, your foundations, what you should get in place, what you already have, and how it is interconnected. Map this out, and that's something you really need to take with you on this journey. And then with regards to the systems you're working with, maybe in the transportation management system or with all your carriers, for example, consider them, what they also have in place and what you see with them, but also think about, again, your technology providers, your advanced analytics tools providers, and then think about also with whom you want to get into boat to go on to this journey of creating a digital twin. And even though it's important, of course, to get started and maybe pick a KPI on, for example, transport or inventory, it's also important to not start this in isolation, but ensure that there is some alignment within the operations, that there's a DAI model to support decision-making, to support this vision of where you're eventually going.
So even though you pick a point to start, you have to make sure that this is aligned with where you want to go broadly and generally.
Yes, I totally agree, because in the end, it's again about integrating also the different pieces of data, integrating the different organizations, departments, or people that are there, because only then you can, in the end, take decisions proactively, right? Because one part of the puzzle might impact another part of the puzzle, or it might impact another part of the gear or mechanism, or however you want to display it. So you should definitely have the buy-in, I would say, from a governance team.
Every time there is a new technology, there are early adopters, and then there are those who, wait and see, how is this going to shake out? And part of that is because nobody, I think, wants to have gone all in on a technology that then ends up not being what's used broadly. People are like, which is going to be the thing? Given that technology is changing so rapidly, Pari, how can life sciences companies be sure that the supply chain systems they're building today, the digital twins, how can they be sure that's going to serve them well tomorrow and into the future?
Yep, great question. Every step you take in this direction needs to be a measured step that is aligned with your overall vision and your roadmap. And we help our clients shape that vision, and we help them flesh out a roadmap. And all of these different pieces that need to go into place become part of that roadmap. Some of them you may already have. You just need to integrate to some of your other pieces or new pieces that you're implementing that you don't have. All of that becomes part of the roadmap. We help our customers do that. Ultimately, it's going to prevent the kind of pandemic-related issues that a lot of supply chains had, including life sciences. It could be your answer to continued sustenance of your supply chain in the event of the next regional war or geopolitical embargo. These are all very real and imminent risks. And every step you take today to further secure your supply chain, to further make it more resilient and able to react and survive these kind of adverse events that are continuing to accelerate at an increasing pace, the more your CEO is going to like your Chief Operations Officer. And that should help you, yes.
We have talked today about how life sciences and pharmaceutical companies can use artificial intelligence and digital twins to secure and optimize supply chains. And we've also alluded to how extremely complex this is. All companies are unique. All are at different points in establishing foundational systems, in investing technology, in integration. So I really encourage listeners, if you want to learn more, reach out to the experts who can advise you on what may fit for your company at this point in time. Pari, how can folks get a hold of you?
Yep, I'm available on the NTT website. We have an NTT supply chain consulting page. We have a life sciences consulting page. Please go make your way there and find out everything we offer. There are ways to get in touch with us through the links on there. We'd be glad to reach out to you. We even do workshops. We do focus sessions, focus engagements, sustainability checks for your supply chain. There are many different ways to engage with us.
Thank you so much. And Barrett, thank you for sharing your expertise as well. Before we go, I want to encourage each of you listeners, please join us early next year. We will be having a webinar to further explore this topic. Webinar, Building AI-Enabled Digital Twins to Secure Your Supply Chain. So please watch for upcoming notices of that as well. Perry and Barrett, thank you both again. And thanks to all of you who have joined us for Secure Innovation, how life sciences and pharmaceutical companies can safely seize opportunity. Here's to security, safety, and innovation.